Hello YouTube. I want to get back to the investigation of the Dyatlov Pass tragedy that I have conducted since 1990s. Today I want to present a point of view of the Russian researchers from the Urals, dedicated and experienced people, and active in the territory where they live, including the part of the mountains where the Dyatlov Pass tragedy took place. And also I want to show you comments of those who read this hypothesis. As you know, I bring forth all fascinating hypotheses about this mystery of the 20th century. I guess that ranks among the most significant and heartbreaking. So here it goes. It's no secret that in the materials of the criminal case and the investigation of the incident with the Dyatlov's group, there are eyewitness statements that can be designated as evidence of UFO sightings. Immediately, it is worth noting that this abbreviation does not denote the fact of the appearance of alien spaceships, but only says that the eyewitnesses could not identify the object that they had observed. Mysterious objects were observed in the winter and early spring of 1959 in the vicinity of the fatal pass. Reports of the observation of the passage of the unidentified objects were also received from the search teams who were at the place of the disappearance of these tourists. And as I told you before, this is how in Russia it's referred to people who do visitations to mountains, active sports, and so forth. And by the way, for those who don't know the history of the Dyatlov Pass hikers, please look at the playlist in my channel, and you will find all the details. So I will not repeat it here. Well, the first person to raise the topic of the relationship of mysterious objects in the context of the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass, surprisingly enough, was the investigator Lev Ivanov. Yes, the same detective who led the investigation into the case of the missing tourists. After retiring in the early 1990s, he published an article with the telling title, "The Secrets of Fireballs." And it says, the essence of the publication was that the true cause of what happened was connected with something beyond the ordinary, and the observation of fireballs is a direct confirmation of this. It can be said that this publication has become fundamental in the formation of the conspiracy theories around the Dyatlov group. Now, it is difficult to judge why Ivanov wrote this article. It is possible that this theory was due to the general information agenda of that time, full of reports of paranormal phenomena and contacts with aliens. And I will add that at that time the Soviet Union had experienced the free flow of information, so to say, based on Gorbachev's policies of perestroika and glasnost. And this was the year, by the way, when the KGB released their documents, I don't think all of them, but bulk of documents about UFOs. Anyway, one of the first documentary evidence that in February 1959 a fireball flew in the sky over the Sverdlovsk region was a small article in the newspaper Tagil Worker in English, dated February 17, 1959. This article was attached to the materials of the criminal case as a confirmation of the testimony of the interviewees in the investigation. The author of the article, Kisel, was not only one who witnessed a strange phenomenon. Here is the message of the meteorologist technician Tokareva. On February 17 at 6:50 local time, an unusual phenomenon appeared in the sky. And then this star got rid of the tail, became brighter than the stars, and flew gradually. It began to inflate. A large sphere was formed, shrouded in haze. And then a star lit up inside this ball or sphere, from which a crescent moon was first formed. Then a small ball was formed, not so bright. The big ball gradually began to fade. became like a blur. At 7:05, completely disappeared. The star was moving from the south to the northeast. Among the eyewitnesses of the passage of the mysterious object were soldiers standing at the guard post of the Ivdelag correctional or labor camp. The prosecutor of the city of Ivdel interviewed 5 servicemen from the 6602V military unit. In the testimony of Private Anatoly Leontievich Anisimov, a copy of which you can see in the accompanying illustrations to my video, he mentioned a ball or sphere of small size, enveloped by white fog, appearing in the southerly direction. The impression was that the sphere itself emitted this fog in the shape of a white circle around the sphere. It was visible for 10 minutes and then disappeared in the northerly direction as if dissolved at a distance. It is noteworthy that a similar phenomenon was observed in other settlements that are hundreds of kilometers away from the Dyatlov Pass. There are even reports from eyewitnesses from Sverdlovsk, so the object seen did not have local ties, so to say. The facts of observation of the passage of fireballs are beyond doubt. The main issue is the identification of the phenomenon and, as a consequence, the identification of potential risks that could explain the causes of the incident with the Dyatlov group. After examining the testimony of eyewitnesses, it became clear that the observed phenomenon was directly related to space, and these objects were exclusively of terrestrial origin. Fireballs similar to those observed in 1959 can be seen in the sky over the Urals today. In the description to this video, you will find, for example, 2 videos showing the flight of similar object. Attention, there are colorful Russian expressions in that video. The filming was dated April 5th, 2011. The eyewitnesses were in Yekaterinburg and Kizel, that's in the Perm region. Witnesses on February 17 and March 31st, 1959 also reported seeing a star with outgoing tails, crescents, spirals, and rings. It is safe to say that the star was the spacecraft itself, in this case the rotating block of the second stage of the R-7 rocket. But the emissions of gaseous and liquid oxygen that entered the atmosphere from the oxidizer tanks formed clouds, spirals, and nebula of unusual shape. As for the fireballs, their appearance can also be explained by the regular release of untreated oxygen residues from the tank of the spent stage of the rocket. Due to the fact that this process takes place in an airless space, oxygen forms a cloud around the rocket fragment, and the absence of an atmosphere does not allow it to dissolve. As for the glow, a similar effect is due to the illumination from behind the horizon by the sun's rays, which are often invisible to eyewitnesses. So that you know, the term cosmodrome is a site for launching spacecraft, usually in reference to Soviet or Russian-built sites like the Baikonur in Kazakhstan and the Plesetsk, Russia, cosmodromes. According to the list of space launches, while the launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome took place on February 17, 1959 and the March 31st, 1959. On the 17th, an ICBM with a training unit was dispatched, and it struck the Kura test site in the Far East, and on March 31st, a military satellite was launched. The launch, however, ended in an accident. As for the remoteness of the observation site to Baikonur, which is about 1,700 kilometers, experts in the field of science and technology of space flight have no doubt that eyewitnesses could observe the flight of the rocket. The launch of an intercontinental rocket or missile takes place much higher than the launch of a spacecraft into the near-Earth orbit. In addition, the eyewitnesses of the launches themselves were in a mountainous area, a little but above ground level, from where they could observe the launches according to the launch trajectories. There are many launch trajectories, and this is one of the reasons why observations of rocket flights from the territory of the Urals are a rather rare event. In addition, according to official data, no launches were carried out on the night of February 1st to February 2nd. Accordingly, even if we assume the impossible, the fall of a spent stage on the campsite of the tourist, then there simply would be no place for it to come from. Hypothesis of the conspiracy theory around the failed launch cannot be taken seriously, since in any case there would have been eyewitnesses of the flight of an unidentified object, and there were no such among the inhabitants of the Urals. Summing up, we can say that the fireballs could not have caused what happened at the Dyatlov Pass, and it is unlikely that the flight of a glowing object could scare the Dyatlov Pass hikers so much that they would decide to flee, abandoning everything behind. The Ural researchers note that the other eyewitnesses of the flights of the fireballs or balls were excited, but they did not take any inadequate actions. Okay? So I presented this hypothesis to you. I have my own ideas about what caused the tragedy, but I want you to listen to all credible ideas about this very complicated case. Now I want to show some comments of those Russians who are interested in the investigation of the case and demonstrate sufficient knowledge to offer sensible opinions, whether we agree with them or not. And I have stated repeatedly that I will do my best to demonstrate various hypotheses about this case. One of the commentators provided the following. In the book titled A Task of Special National Importance, from the history of the creation of nuclear missile weapons and strategic missile forces, it is reported that the emergency launch of a rocket from the Kapustin Yar, which was made on February 2nd, 1959. The other commentator confirmed the Baikonur flatly refuses to admit to its rocket launch on this day. The Plisetsk was put into operation in the fall of 1959, so it leaves the Kapustin Yar. It remains only to understand which trajectory the rocket was launched. And one commentator actually contacted the Komsomolskaya Pravda reporter who doggedly pursues this case, Nikolai Varsegov, and I mentioned him in my other videos. Here is what that commentator said. He wrote to Varsegov that it was a self-detonation of a rocket. A fuel tank with a classified fuel composition was exploding. Varsegov replied that this was close to the truth, and he added, perhaps. Another comment about rockets, denying that there was one actually at the Dyatlov Pass area. A rocket, even such a tiny one as the Dvina complex, has a 50-meter flame trail. There was no indication of these complexes in the area of the pass. They covered industrial and military zones. Remember Powers, the pilot of the American spy plane that was shot down over the USSR. Look at the product from the Kura landfill in Kamchatka. During his life, the commentator adds, he had seen enough of various types of such products, both in the USSR and in Russia, and even looked inside them. One commentator offered a very interesting hypothesis, not unlike those that involve foreign intelligence agents' presence and allegedly involved in the tragedy, and in my future videos I will cover that angle in detail. So here's what he said. So everyone who saw and described the fireball was so scared that they did not try to reason further. These are spy automatic drifting balloons, abbreviated as ADB. It is not its appearance that is important, but the contents. Various equipment was suspended from the balloon shell. A camera, a system unit for flight control, a system for taking air samples for radioactivity, a radio system, a VHF receiver transmitter, a self-destruction system. Most importantly, it was a camera that allowed you to take pictures of the territory over which the ADB was flying. But this film had to be delivered to the addressee, NASA or the CIA. The balloons of ADB flew with the air currents at the altitude of 25 to 35 kilometers, just over the landfill under construction in Plisetsk, then over to Novaya Zemlya. The commentator refers, by the way, to the secret Soviet spaceport and testing facilities. Therefore, the Americans provided that on command from the ground, the equipment could be dropped from this balloon in some remote place that was selected specifically for this purpose by people sent to this area under the guise of hunters, loggers, and even under the guise of the Mansi indigenous people. Well, the delivered film was then transferred abroad for good money. Well, as for the guys, the Dyatlov group, apparently they were given the task of following in the footsteps of those people who were supposed to take the equipment or film from these balloons. At that time, about 4,000 such balloons were launched to the Soviet territory from the west and east. The bulk was dumped in the northern Urals and in the south. Soviet air defense shot down these balloons with great difficulty. Radars did not see them since the film from which they were made was radio transparent. It was impossible to send the military there to the pass, since those people who collected this equipment would not have been revealed themselves because they would be scared. Well, the students, so to say, who showed up there and followed in their footsteps had nothing to fear. They were not armed, so when it came to observing these balloons, it turned out that they, the Dyatlov group, were not just tourists. The tent was set up in such a way that the territory was free from the forest was clearly visible. All hikers had cameras. That's where the struggle for the possession of this equipment began. Even the two strong people could force the hikers to hurry out of the tent. Out of their tent, one stood at the entrance and the second knocked on the tent. And then the events happened as many describe, judging by the damage. The latest photos taken by the search teams show that these outsiders have not found everything. Now, here is an interesting piece of information from one of the commentators. Another report on the observation of an unusual phenomenon was dated March 31st, 1959. Early in the morning, the search teams who were at the moment on the fatal pass became eyewitnesses to the passage of the fireball. The observed phenomenon seriously excited the rescuers. A telegram was immediately sent to Sverdlovsk with a request to determine the degree of danger for further stay in the area. Yet another comment from the fireball is this one. The commentator also saw fireball in 1959 in the winter. She was 9 years old and her friend and she were playing in the yard, and the fireball was huge, bright, fiery in color, and the tail was fiery long, and she thinks that that was a cause of the tragedy of this group. It flew low below the clouds and probably moved slow towards tourists. So they scattered on different sides, and that's her opinion. Here's more about the fireballs. In 1959, witness statements were received not from one person, but from several, from the employees of the H-240 Institute who after the end of the movie show on the evening of February 1st, 1959 were returning home and they saw a bright flash in the direction of Otorteni. The statements were recorded. But one commentator was against the fireball hypothesis. Here's what he stated. The fireballs have nothing to do with it. The balls are the flights of ballistic missiles and the separation of stages. The fact that the rocket stage crashed right on the tent or next to it is too incredible. In addition, from such a fall, the stage would have left small fragments, but as far as I know, they were not found there later. And this is an answer to the hypothesis that the Dyatlov group people were killed by a rocket or an oxidizer from it, and the authorities, having noticed traces of the type, removed everything from there. You understand that the Dyatlov group participants were quite experienced in hiking and clearly not cowards. Besides, there were 9 of them. The tent was not covered with an avalanche. If it would fall asleep, then the snow could not melt before the arrival of rescuers, since it was winter frosts. So it was not an avalanche, but something forced them to cut the tent at night for an emergency exit outside, to the outside. Why did it have to be cut? Why didn't they come out through the entrance? So the entrance was barricaded with something, and it was necessary to get out urgently. So something happened in the tent, inside, and it prevented the exit, but it was a threat. And the threat was not only in the tent, but also next to it. So after leaving the tent, they still had to leave it. That's the direction to think, not the fireballs. A keen observation about the fireballs was offered by another commentator. The guys, the Dyatlov group, are watching something unprecedented and admire, rejoice, offer assumptions, etc. No one runs naked in the snow and doesn't die. The Dyatlov group, of course, could have seen something like this, but they did not die from this. Okay, he mentioned another case and compared to the Dyatlov group case. One commentator offered this information. There is an interview with the head of another tourist group who went from Vizg, different to the Dyatlov hikers, and Zolotaryov was originally supposed to go with the other group. In the interview, the head of the group finally identified the object he saw on the night of February 1st to 2nd, 1959, flying approximately over the place where the Dyatlov group pitched a tent. It was like a rocket. The comment regarding the 2011 Russian videos was as follows. Residents of some districts of the Altai territory constantly see what so scared the people in the video when there is a rocket launch from Baikonur. It's a common occurrence. Yes, it looks impressive when you see it for the first time. And this very interesting comment deserves to be heard. Unidentified flying objects, Yeti, fireballs, nonsense. The Dyatlov group, did they change their clothes and cut their clothes with a knife? They were thawed, frozen in Ivdelag, labor camp in the area. They were tortured somewhere in a closed room. Then those who tortured staged this freezing, and they dropped a group of those who staged this from the helicopter. Maybe they also dropped the corpses themselves. They were transported from somewhere. Who had a helicopter? And then the group of those who staged the whole thing was taken away. But most likely, then they were also executed. It's just that rockets and the death of tourists does not fit in any way. There were always some launches. So what if they got to see the launch from the Kapustin Yar? No one died from these launches. No need to look for a cat in a black room. So what? It is obvious that they, the Dyatlov group, were not killed by a rocket, but were killed by people. One group of the Dyatlov hikers was dropped into the ice hole, where they were found in the spring in a stream, almost in one place. The other group was not completely dragged from the cedar tree, where they were thrown off the helicopter and the branches were broken to the ice hole, and they were left lying in a straight line, that no one can explain the reasons for killing in a fanatical way as yet. But here the main question is, why should the authorities hide fanatical murderers and stage freezing and other natural causes? And whose department is the helicopter? I mean, what department does it belong to? Who dispatched it? Why did they find out about the Dyatlov Pass incident so quickly? Did the pilots see something during the flight? Why are the efforts of the KGB out there if this is an ordinary criminal case, for example? Wouldn't it be easier to find the killers and punish them, to make a demonstration by making it public execution? Who could be other than tourists in an uninhabited territory? And how did they get there? Why hasn't it been declassified yet? There are a lot of questions. And was one of them, for example, a traitor and tortured everyone in a row for any information? Was the decision made to get rid of them far from the civilization so nobody can see? Well, finally, here is what one commentator stated, and I think we can all agree. The topic will never end, because the death of the group was accompanied by facts that contradict one another. Besides, over the years, it becomes more and more difficult with those facts, as those who were involved in the investigation themselves have passed on to another world. So that's what I wanted to present to you today, and I will continue with my investigation, and of course show you more developments from Russia and more hypotheses. I think those who support me, and if you can support my research, you will find you'll find the links in the description to this video. Please tell others about my channel, and please subscribe.